Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. If you've been following us recently, you've probably noticed we're doing a new series. This is number 4 in a series of 6, and today's episode is about the power of investing in yourself. So, Dustin, we've seen this all too often where a lot of professionals and leaders don't invest in themselves. Now, it almost seems like people are more likely to invest in others before they're willing to invest in themselves. I've seen it where people are sometimes willing to invest in their health, obviously, not enough of them. And the thing that really gets kind of pushed to the back is they're not as willing to invest in their own personal well being, their wealth, their relationships, etc. Why is it that we just don't see enough people investing in themselves?
It's a great question. I think it reminds me of a story that I went through. This was years ago, where I was having the same debate of, is it worth to invest in myself in this thing? There was a class that I wanted to take that it was an online class. It was from this expert that was going to help me on something, and it was $4,000. And I remember at that time, I think my car was probably worth less than that at that time. And so I remember having this thought of like, okay, what was going through my head and what was preventing me from doing it, right? Like, one, it just seemed like a huge amount of money. I had, a lot of questions of, would it work and what would this mean? And ultimately, after kind of several months of thinking it through, I finally pulled the trigger. But there were even steps I had to go through, right? I had to convince myself. I actually had to, with that price point and where we were financially, I had to get my wife to buy into it and commit to it. And one of the things that was great about it was once I actually did it, it was super successful and led to a lot of other great things. And in many ways, why was that the case? Well, in one thing, because I had to think through it, I had to really decide, is it worth it? Plus if I was going to write a check that big, I was absolutely going to do the work. Then if I was going to get my wife convinced to do it, there's no way I wasn't going to do the work. And so then I did the thing, right? I did the work, and lo and behold, because somebody else had already gone through the pain and anguish for me, like they told me what steps to take. I took the steps, and it was uber successful. And I think about I think about all the situations where that happens. And what if I hadn't made that decision? It's not like I'd be on a street somewhere. But when I think about the kind of the thing that led to the thing that led to the thing in that one decision, and I think about how many people hesitate to make that same investment in themselves. And, I think it's a lot of things. Again, if I think through my own lens in that story, right, I had fear, right? I had a feel of failure, fear that, it just wasn't going to work. I wasn't going to be able to pull it off no matter how much training. I wasn't going to be good enough to do it. That kind of feeds into confidence. There is a financial element of it, right? Like, so I'm writing a check for this, where is that going to come from? What's that kind of give and take there? A lot of like overthinking, call it procrastination, call it, analyzing. But I think a lot of times we have this paralysis by analysis.
Oh, yeah.
There was even a level of guilt, I think, a lot of times for people in investing in themselves. Like when you talk about like investing in others versus investing in themselves, like this guilt of, okay, I'm going to spend some money to invest in myself. Well, should I instead do that for someone else? I think, people do this all the time. Like when you hear people talking about hiring a coach or a mentor or a fitness trainer or whatever, it's like, well, we're saving up for this or we're doing this. And it's like, look, I get it. That's reality. And those are choices to be made. But I think far too often we don't recognize that, maybe investing in ourselves actually will then tenfold that response back. And then, the kind of the last two that I certainly went through, one was this BS excuse of time, where like, oh, I'm not going to have the time to do this. I got all these other things. When in reality, if you're seeking that thing out to solve a problem, it's the definition of buying time because
Right.
You're cutting all of these curves that otherwise you wouldn't be able to do. And then having that clarity of vision, which we talk about so often, I think people hesitate to invest in themselves because they disconnect. Okay, in their head, they realize that this is a problem they need to solve. And in their head, they believe that this might be a way to help solve it. But because they're not really clear on the future they're trying to create, there's just this gap in between the two. And I think those are a lot of the mental struggles I think a lot of people go through. And it really pulls them back from making that investment so that they can get over the hump to have their next level of success.
Dustin, you mentioned excuses and things we tell ourselves. There's something that I hear a lot from people. It's like, I can't because of this or because of that. And some people will call it selfish, but I ultimately tell people you have to be selfish, because if you are not selfish, you cannot be selfless. And something that I learned a very long time ago was that, if you're married, you have kids, you've got jobs and investments, you've got a home, grass to cut, you have a lot of cups to fill. If you have a big family, a big team, a big company, I have to fill my cup, because if I don't fill my cup, there's no way I'm filling 3 or 4 other cups. And the most important cups, obviously, are the ones within the 4 walls of your home. And so what I tell people is, yeah, maybe investing in yourself is selfish, but I think everyone has to be a little bit selfish at times, because if we zoom out even further, I think that we talk about mental health, and mental health in a good way. If you want to be in a really good space mentally, you want to be in a good space that you can be the best spouse, the best parent, the best friend, the best leader, whatever it is in your life, you got to take care of yourself, which means a lot of different things to different people. We've talked about prioritization of our health, eating well, exercising. But in this case, now I go back to something Chris Williams said on the podcast earlier this year. He said, even coaches need coaches. And I think it's just so important to look at it and say, I deserve it. To tell yourself that you're worth it. And don't think about what it's going to cost. Think about what it's going to be. What is the outcome going to be? And get yourself excited about the investment, because it's no different than rewarding yourself for a small accomplishment, for a small victory. I really believe it's okay to feel selfish and to not feel guilty. You shouldn't feel guilty about that whatsoever.
And I think that's a key distinction, because I think a lot of, what do people associate selfish with? They absolutely associate selfish to guilt. And when you really break down what is being selfish, right? So selfish is literally looking out for yourself. And what I always kind of compare that to is it's really a level of perspective. Certainly there is a level of being selfish that is unhealthy. But I feel like so many people believe that the minute you're doing anything in your own best interest, that then is negative selfish. When in reality, it's not. I think a lot of times people have a very unfair bar for themselves of the things that they should do to invest in themselves. Because the other thing about this is, why do they feel that it's selfish? You tend to feel that it's selfish because your belief is that by you doing that thing for yourself, it's a zero-sum game, and therefore it will never come back to those around you. And I use myself as this example, right, Chris? You and I talked about this a lot. The process I went through for my own health for decades, the idea that I would somehow put my health above my family, my team, the things I want to do for business, the things I want to do for community, was foreign to me. That felt crazy selfish. Now, I also couldn't spend 10 hours a day just working out and being perfectly fit and eating perfect either, right? Like that would be too much.
Right.
But in reality, now what is my lens? My lens is that the only way for me to show up and be selfless in all of these things, and to do that better than what I did yesterday, I have to be better myself. And the only way I can be better myself is if I'm investing in myself in some which way, shape, or form to do that. And so I think you're exactly right that we have to eliminate the fact that anytime you do anything for yourself, that somehow we should have some sort of guilt to that. Again, there's always too much of a good thing, but we have to start by saying that, why would anyone around us, anyone that that loves us, cares about us, is looking for our help on anything, why would it be worse for them if we were better?
Wouldn't. Another thing that I say so often, when I'm on podcasts, people always ask me for like a takeaway at the end. And I say this, it sounds negative at the surface level, but I think it's really positive. And I say, nobody's looking out for you, but you. And well, you could argue, your spouse, your family, your kids, sure. But no one's going to want the raise, the promotion, the business, the trip, the vacation, the Rolex more than you do. And it's almost never a negative outcome. If you're investing in the right things, it's always going to be net positive. So when I zoom out from this for a moment, I think back to the greater picture here, which is the 2020 vision guide. A big part of this is identifying the priorities in life. And I think regardless of who we're talking to or who we're talking about, you should be one of the priorities because you are in control of your destiny. You are a big part of the outcome. It's not the things that are going on around you. It starts with you and it ends with you. I always like to say I'm in control. I'm responsible for everything as a business leader. So to me, it always starts with what are my priorities, and priorities should always be you because if I take care of myself, I'm going to show up every day with more energy, better attitude. I'm going to feel ready to tackle the day with the right mindset. And, especially if we're talking about long term investing in coaching and programs and self betterment, reading, whatever it might be, you got to find the right way to invest in yourself, but it's got to be a priority. So, Dustin, how does one come about these priorities? Because it is a big part of the vision guide.
You're exactly right. So one, I believe you're exactly right. I don't, where you invest in yourself, if you're not starting with a really clear vision of what you're trying to achieve in life, I think it's just really hard. I think then you're shooting darts blindfolded. But I think once you create that clarity of vision, and this is really what excites me about, what we've done with the Hustle Academy, is the opportunity for someone to accelerate their success in all domains of life, right? Like so many of investing in yourself for people, it's in a certain domain of life, right? It's in their health domain, in their wealth domain, in, relationships, and maybe their mindset, maybe some of their very tactical skills, but it's rarely do you find scenarios where it's like, how can I invest in myself that's going to have a broad appeal in literally any domain that I'm trying to achieve? And when I think about all that we've put together for this Hustle Academy and the success that people have from it in all these different domains, gets me super excited because I think far too often people are chasing a silver bullet in one domain of life, as opposed to really getting a broader vision of what are you trying to achieve more broadly, and how do you set up a plan for success in all of those things. This is the whole concept of everyone talking about work-life balance, like, which to me is a BS term. Like, when you really think about it, like what is the balance you're trying to achieve? But the balance you're trying to achieve is you're trying to achieve, hopefully, goals in a variety of different categories, right? There's not a lot of people I meet that are like, well, I want to achieve this in business, but I don't care if I'm dead and no one likes me, right? Like, there's a balance in all of this stuff, but how you do that is by creating a vision and then using the tools that other people have built and the trainings that other people have built, the pain that other people have gone through to experience these things. Again, I go back to any coach, mentor, or training course that I've taken. That's the beauty of it, is that all of the pain, all of the mistakes, like I'm capturing all of that at a fraction of what they had to pay for it. And to me, that's, again, where I think it's not just should you invest in yourself, or even should you invest in yourself or where, right? But like, how do you find that thing that's going to provide the highest ROI possible for the efforts that you're going to put in? Because if you're setting a goal and they're worth it to you, like, why wouldn't you want to go after it with intent?
Yeah. The thing when I talk about and think about investing in myself, and I talk to other people about it, it seems as though there's a fear of failure or fear of investment. And this isn't so true of people like you and I who have invested in coaches and masterminds and different types of programs like that in the past. Typically from people who are newer to investing in themselves. How and why do you overcome that fear of failure?
Yeah. So when I think about how I've overcome it now, like now, I mean, I'm still thoughtful. It's not like I just join any training or course that I want to, right? You're still being thoughtful. How does that tie to your vision? I think ultimately how you get past it is by really thinking through what would achieving your goals actually mean. So as an example, Chris, we've seen this, right? As we talked to tons of people, they complete our 2020 vision guide. They suddenly have this plan, this clarity of like, okay, here's where I'm going to go in all these different domains. Okay, well, what's next? Well, there's usually some element of what you need to do is not just creating the clarity, it's creating the clarity. And then you need to upskill yourself somewhere, right? Whatever that is. It could be organization. It could be follow through. It could be, how to be more efficient, how to be more effective. There's lots of different things. But to me, it's that's how you get over it is now. So now you have really clear vision. You have very clear on, okay, what is really the next thing that I need that's going to be the easiest path for me to accelerate forward towards my goals. Because if you then know that this is what my goal is, this is what I'm going to achieve, and this is why it's valuable to me, now the upfront cost of whatever that is becomes almost irrelevant.
Yeah.
Because it's okay, I know it's a thing, but I'd rather spend the money there than these 4 times going out to eat. Because look, I'll just eat in, 4 days this next year and that'll allow me to achieve this, achieve that, achieve this, achieve that. And that means a year from now, again, depending on what your goal is, if your goal is around the, making money or career or wealth or whatever, then a year from now, you're never going to worry about that again. Right. And that's certainly what I saw. I mean, as I started to kind of take these leaps, now it's really easy to make the next investment because to your point, you have less fear of failure. You have more confidence that if you do the work, it's going to work. And at a minimum, what is the minimum thing you're trying to get? You're at a minimum just trying to get your money back. But once you've done this enough times, you realize that you might get your money back in the first 30 seconds. And then your ROI is it's infinite beyond that. Again, you got to go find people that you trust, that you respect, that, have a good perspective on things. I think that's sometimes where people get off track. But once you've built that confidence and you've trained that muscle to be like, hey, this is how I evaluate, this is how I make a decision. Now I'm going to make that investment and now I'm going to do the work.
So if you're listening to this episode and you're thinking about investing in yourself, but maybe you don't know where to invest, that's okay. That's why people hire coaches, is to help them identify where they can improve, where they're deficient. And there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, I think sometimes we have to be willing to be vulnerable and develop some of that self-awareness, because not everyone is perfectly self-aware of where their strengths are and where their weaknesses are. So I implore you to invest in yourself. In fact, I'm going to challenge you that this week you should zoom out and say, where can I invest in myself this week? Or depending on where you're at with time and bandwidth, maybe you want to say, where am I going to invest in myself this month? Because ultimately, if you're making a consistent investment in yourself throughout 2025, you're going to stack monthly victories and you are going to win the year. And that's ultimately what all this is about. Okay, so to put a bow on this, we're talking about the power of investing in yourself. And this is a step that really can't be missed. Like any of these steps, you have to go through this step by step to really maximize the vision guide and to really maximize your 2025. So I encourage you to go back and listen or re-listen to some of the episodes early in this 6-part series. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. We'll catch you on the flip side. Peace.